Remember that for a custom application to be enabled, you need to configure a web probe. To get started, you can either go to the Probes tab in the Configuration menu or select Add New Probe for an application. Setting up a new probe is a simple 3-step process. In the first step, you'll configure general probe settings, starting with a descriptive name. There is no need for any other changes here. The application name is already selected, and the web probe type is set by default. Next, you can configure the probe to monitor multiple user groups, users in particular locations or departments, or a combination of these. For example, the custom application you had selected earlier is only being used by a particular department, so it makes sense to limit the probe only to users in that department. Along the same lines, you also have the option to select user groups, locations, or departments that you do not want to monitor. Reducing unnecessary probe traffic is always good practice, but it is especially important when configuring web probes for internal applications through Zscaler Private Access. Since web probes for ZPA are currently not cached, you should probe only for users, user groups, and departments that use that application. In the second configuration step, you need to specify the destination URL. This is the web address the probe will request. There are a few advanced settings that are not commonly changed and only apply to special use cases. First, there is the option to customize the HTTP request header that is passed as part of the probe. For example, if the target website wires an authentication token, you could use an authentication header and include the token value. Now you can add or delete HTTP response status codes that will be considered as success codes for the probe. If the configured URL returns HTTP code that is not in this list, then the probe is considered failed, and that will lower the ZDX score. By default, we use 2XX and 3XX HTTP response codes, but there may be cases where you want to accept some HTTP error codes as success. For example, if a web application returns a code not in the 2XX and 3XX range, even though the request is valid, you can add it here. When you scroll down, you can, if needed, change any of the remaining default values. For example, if the application being probed is expected to be slow, you can increase the number of attempts and timeout thresholds to reduce probe errors. This may be useful when probing a file download URL, which is expected to take much longer than a simple web page. If you want to only measure response time to the first URL, without redirection, you can disable follow redirects. And in the case of an application that has a lot of redirects, you can increase the default number. And in the third step, you can review the WebPro configuration and then click Submit. Once you activate the changes, the new web probe is listed on the Probes page.